Well, last week, Pastor Josh taught us a powerful message that he called, He Shows Up. He shows up. And he taught us that for 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus just kept showing up to his followers time and time again. And that's why today I want to talk to you about what to do after he shows up. After he shows up, because all week I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about those of you who made a decision to surrender your life to Jesus, and then Monday came and you realized that not everybody around you made that same decision on Easter. Come on, it's real, right? It's hard to walk that thing out sometimes. There are those who I know are sitting in the room today, and you know that he's risen. You know that he's real. You know that you're saved, but you also know that you're stuck. And I want to tell you up front that this isn't a message for people who have it all figured out. Actually, if you're in the room or you're online today and you think you have it all figured out, do me a favor and don't tell me that, okay? Nobody wants to know that, because this is a message for people who don't have it all figured out. For the people who are sitting in the room and maybe we're asking the question, God, now what? Now what do I do? And so I want us to read a passage of Scripture together this morning. And this passage of Scripture, it takes place after the resurrection, but Jesus he's already shown up a few times, okay? So it's after the resurrection, but they've already seen Jesus a few times. We're going to pick up the story here in John chapter 21 at verse 3. And it says, Simon Peter said to the others, I am going fishing. Well, we will come with you, they told him. And so they went out in a boat, but all that night they did not catch a thing. And as the sun was rising, Jesus stood at the water's edge, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And then he asked them, young men, haven't you caught anything? Not a thing, they answered. And he said to them, throw your net out on the right side of the boat, and you will catch some. And so they threw the net out, and they could not pull it back in because they had caught so many fish. And the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Peter heard that it was the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water. You know, it's a strange time for Jesus' closest followers. See, on one hand, they're extremely happy because Jesus is alive. But how many of you know that on the other hand, they're also extremely confused about what they're supposed to do? See, they're stuck somewhere in a season of something incredible that God did and trying to figure out what they're supposed to do next. But it's really Peter for me, y'all. See, for Peter, it's even deeper than that. See, his questions aren't about what God did. They're not even really about how he's supposed to respond. His questions are about what he did. His questions are about his failures, his actions. See, Peter fully believed that Jesus had risen from the grave. He'd already seen him more than once since he'd resurrected. It's not always our lack of belief. Listen, it can be, but it's not always our lack of belief in God that holds us back. It's often the things that we've done, maybe the things that we haven't done, that make us wonder, can he still use me? Does he still want me? Did I miss my opportunity? And so today I'm bringing a message for every person in the room and online who can relate, because I know I can. I know I can. You see, many of you know our story. Matt and I moved to Northern Virginia from our small town home back in the coal mining towns of southwestern Virginia. We lived there for about 8 years. And while we were there, we were working great jobs. We were serving in our local church, but there was just something that was missing. We longed to be near family. And so we prayed and we asked God for years, 8 years, to move us closer to family. And God did move us. but not where we thought we were headed. You see, God gave us a desire and a burden to move to Richmond, and we were able to help Pastor Josh and Crystal start this church. And many of you have come up to me throughout the last years and come up to Matt and you're like, you guys are awesome. That's so cool. And it was great. But what I want to talk to you about and share with you today is something that you don't know. And that's that for about a year before that, about a year before God had put this desire in our heart, I had stepped down from a position of leadership in our church because I felt like I was failing. Now listen, it wasn't because I felt like God was calling me into a new season. It was because I felt like I wasn't measuring up, because I was letting everybody down. And I know that God made us all differently. He uniquely designed each one of us and gave us all different gifts and strengths. And God gave me the gift to execute. Just ask my husband. I like to do stuff, I like to get it done. I just like to do this and do this and do this. I like to achieve things. And I like to achieve things at a super high level, okay? I do not like to fail. I hate to fail. So please don't come up to me after this message and give me all these proverbs and life affirmations about how failure fits you for your future and blah, 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 blah. I don't want to hear it, okay? I understand it. I know you're probably right, but I still hate to fail. I love a good challenge. I just love it. See, my mantra is when things get hard, you just try harder. You just need to do a little bit more. But in this season, I was showing up earlier and I was staying later, and my team just kept getting smaller and smaller. And so I quit. And it haunted me. See, I started to believe that I didn't just fail, but that I was a failure. I believed that I was incapable and that I was ill-equipped. And right there, I found myself in a hard place. Just like Peter, see, I had failed, and it didn't strip me of my faith, but if I'm honest, I was wondering if it had robbed me of my future. And it was right in the middle of this season, right smack in the middle of it, when my sweet husband came down the townhome stairs one morning and he said, Brett, I can't sleep at night. I can't sleep at night. God's keeping me awake. I think we're supposed to move to Richmond and help Pastor Josh and Crystal start Heights Church. Y'all don't think that's funny? That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Right in the middle of me saying, I'm the biggest failure ever, Matt comes down the stairs and says, let's start a new church. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can only imagine all the things that went through my mind. And I'm pretty sure I immediately gave him a laundry list of all the reasons why this was impossible. Like, this was absolutely impossible. Number one, we barely knew Pastor Josh and Crystal. Like, other than knowing their first and last names, that was about the end of it. We didn't know them at all. And so I was like, Matt, we barely know them. We're not pastors. We're not church planners. We live about 2 hours from Richmond. We don't know a single person in that city. We've never even been to that city before. We've never even been there. And by the way, I don't know if you remember, Matt, but we have a plan for our future. And Richmond, it's not it. That's not it. It wasn't the plan. But if I'm honest, it really wasn't about that at all. It was really about me. See, what I really should have said was, Matt, I'm scared I can't do that. Because I already tried and I failed. I mean, I let everyone down before, babe. I can't do that again. You don't know, but I'm still carrying so much shame. So much shame. And I believe that I'm speaking to someone today who's here and you're in a season where you don't know what to do next. Maybe you just have no idea what step you're supposed to take next. But maybe you're thinking you had a good run, but it might be over for you. Maybe someone told you it was over for you. Maybe you think there's no way forward after what you did. You see, I get it. Peter got it. But the message today is that you do not have to stay here. You don't have to stay here. See, there are some things that I learned through my own personal experience, and there are some things that we'll see here in this text that when we don't know what to do, I think they're going to help us know what to do next. So I want you to grab your pen, grab something to take notes with. Maybe it's your phone. I know you're all taking notes, so I'm just letting you know ahead of time. It's time to get ready, okay? Get ready to take notes. When we don't know what to do next, the first thing we need to do is go back. Just simply go back. See, Simon Peter said to the others, I am going fishing. And I was listening to some messages this past week, and this pastor asked the question. It was a good question. He said, did Peter say he was going fishing because he lost his faith, or did he go fishing because he was trying to find it? Because he was trying to find his faith. See, maybe Peter wasn't saying, I'm giving up. Maybe Peter was saying, I'm going back. I'm going to go back to the place where I knew I had something. I'm going to go back there. You see, when we don't know what to do, there's something powerful about going back to the place where we met Jesus. And so I want you to close your eyes right now. I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to go back to where you met Jesus. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe you're not sure where that is, but maybe there's some times in your life where you think that was him. You think it was him. I want you to go there. And I want you to remember the price that he paid, listen, not just for me, it was for you. It was where he brought you from, and it's what he freed you from. I want you to remember that he knew all about us. He knew the good and the bad. He knew our strengths and our weaknesses, and he still said yes. Do you remember it? See, remembering takes us from this place of guilt and being downcast and saying, gosh, I'm just a failure. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not where I want to be. But when we remember where we met Jesus, it takes us from that place to God, I'm not where I want to be. I know I'm not where I think I should be, but I also know that because of Jesus, I am not where I was. You see, when we remember, it takes us from this place to a new place where we can say, Jesus, even though I have failed you over and over again, you have never failed me. You saw me even when I was at my lowest point, and you still said that I was worth rescuing. You still said I was worth it. Sometimes we just need to go back and remember. And so this week I did what I just asked you to do. I went back and I remembered. You see, I met Jesus when I was 8 years old. I just got home from summer camp, and I was standing in my bedroom looking out my window. My parents live on the very tip top of a mountain. There's no houses, no lights around. It was pitch black outside. And I was looking out my window, and I was looking up at the stars, and I was thinking about everything that I'd learned about God. And just like that, it all clicked for me. As I was standing there, I was like, God, you love me. You love me. You love me so much that you sent Jesus to die for me. You knew my name on that cross. You saw my face on that cross. In that moment, it was real and it was personal, and I gave Jesus everything that an 8-year-old girl had to give. But see, when I go back to where I met him, I couldn't help but think about all the people who led me to him. my parents who took me to church every Sunday, the countless people who taught my Sunday school classes week after week, the camp counselors. I went to church camp every summer. So the camp counselors who gave their summers up so that kids like me could hear about Jesus. See, when I went back to where I met Jesus, I remembered that I met him because someone took the time to lead me to him. And when I was in that moment, I just knew that regardless of how much I felt like I had failed, of how much I felt like I wouldn't measure up, the one thing I could do is stand in line for somebody else because somebody stood in line for me. And so there's something about going back that just shifts our perspective, and it helps us see things just a little bit more clearly. So we need to go back. And then after we go back, we need to listen and obey. Listen and obey. The disciples went fishing, and they fished all night, and the word says they didn't catch a thing. Let's pick it back up. It says, as the sun was rising, Jesus stood at the water's edge, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And then he asked them, young men, haven't you caught anything? Not a thing, they answered. And so he said to them, throw your net out on the right side of the boat and you will catch some. And so they threw the net out and they could not pull it back in because they had caught so many fish. They'd fished all night and they didn't have anything to show for it. And Jesus shows up on the shore and he asks a very specific question. Haven't you caught anything? Think about it. We know a little bit about Peter. We know he wasn't super patient. We know he's very passionate. Could you imagine where Peter's at right now? Because I think he's probably hanging by a thread. And he's standing in a boat, and it's obvious the nets are empty. And some guy on the shore says, haven't you caught anything? And I'm sure Peter wanted to say, no, I haven't caught anything. You can see my nets. They're empty. I came out here to do the only thing I thought I could still do to help this thing move forward, and I can't even do that. No, sir, I haven't caught anything. I haven't caught anything. The thing I thought I could do, I can't even do that. And Jesus said, drop your net one more time. Jesus said, try again. See, I think that Jesus has a way of putting his finger on bruises that we have, and he does not do it to hurt us. He does it to help us. Because we like to walk around pretending like we ain't got no bruises. We're good. Things are good with me. I'm doing great. And then somebody else puts their finger on your bruise, and we hear, ah! You hurt me. You offended me. That thing you said, that hurt me. And Jesus said, I want to get to the root of that. Amen. I want to get to the root of what's going on there. He said, will you try it one more time? See, we started driving down to launch parties and interest meetings in November of 2014. Our church didn't launch until February of 2015. And so we would drive down on Fridays, load our car with kids and stuff, and we would come and we would help make everything happen. We'd prepare for the launch party or the interest meeting, and then we'd help make that party happen, and then we'd help clean that party up, and then we'd pack everything up, and we'd go back to Northern Virginia. And we did that for about 5 months before we were able to move down. And I started to think, I feel a little bit better. Ain't no bruise there no more. I'm feeling pretty good. Because I can do stuff, I already told you that. I'm a doer. So I'm like, God, this I can do. I can drive down, I can do all the things, I can pack everything up, and I can go back. And a few months into it, it was time to start preparing for launch. And Pastor Josh and Crystal, they asked Matt and I if they could call us one day. So they wanted to talk about who was on the team, like all 9 of us. They wanted to talk about who was on the team and where they thought we would each best fit. And do you know what position they asked me to fill on our launch team? the very same position that I had been in at community church, that I had failed in, and that I had walked away from. Finger, bruise, bruise. See, it was the same position. And I want us to think back to the text because I think that there's something there that we shouldn't miss. You see, it was right there in that middle of that season of now what? Of something God did and the disciples trying to figure out what their next move is, and Peter wrestling and struggling with what he had already done. When Jesus walks up and he does a miracle using the very thing that Peter saw, empty nets, as confirmation that he had reached his end. The one thing he thought he might still be able to do, he couldn't even do that. And Jesus says, I'm going to use that thing to do my miracle. Maybe to many of you in the room today, the Lord is saying, hey, I know you relapsed. Will you try again? Maybe he's saying, I know you lost your temper with your kids or your spouse this morning. Try again. I know you think you can't. Will you try again? See, you aren't strong enough on your own, but God is with you. You are going to mess up, but his grace is sufficient. He's not asking us for perfection. He's asking us for obedience. He's saying, do you trust me enough to try again? A few days after Pastor Josh and Crystal asked me to take that position on our launch team, I was sitting in our kitchen and I was working on some things for the church. Not with a good attitude. Don't think I'm better than I didn't have a good attitude about it just because I was doing it. And I was sitting there and I was working on some stuff, probably grumbling, and Matt came down again and he said, Britt, do you realize you're the only person on our team who knows how to do any of this? Nobody else has the experience that you have in this area. And I'm telling you, like cold water out of a bucket, it was like my husband had said, there's the Lord. That's the Lord. See, in all my mess, I hadn't recognized him. But through a season I thought was a total loss, God had equipped me to do something. And then he pulled me up from the place I was, and he planted me in a place where nobody else could do the thing he equipped me to do. Y'all, this time there was fish in my net. There were fish in my net. But listen, here's what I need you to understand. I would have never known that there were fish in my net if I had refused to drop them down one more time. If I had said, no, God, I can't do it again. You're wrong. I can't do this. I would have never known that he was going to do a miracle in my life. See, when we don't know what to do next, God does. He simply does. He knows what's next. And when he speaks, we need to listen and obey. See, when we don't know what to do, we need to go back. And then we need to listen and obey. And my last thing I'm going to push you to do today is that we need to go all in. We need to go all in. The word says that the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Peter heard that it was the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around himself and he jumped into the water. I don't want you to forget what Peter knew, because this is really important. You see, Peter knew that Jesus had the ability to walk on water. Because just a few months before, maybe it was years before, it was a few chapters before, the disciples are out in a boat, they're on the water, and a huge storm comes. And Jesus came to them walking on the water. So Peter had experienced it before. And when Jesus came to them, Peter said, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you. Tell me to come to you walking on the water. But I think that there's something that we need to see in this text. It's that this time, Peter doesn't stand there and say, Jesus, if it's really you, tell me. Tell me to come to you. John said, that's Jesus. Peter said, done. That's all I needed to hear. That's Jesus. I got to get to him. And I'm just wondering how many of you are sitting in the room today and week after week, Jesus is right in front of you on the shore and you're like, okay, Jesus, if it's you, you just tell me. If you tell me, I'll move. If you do this, then I'll do that. But I think that there's something in the way that Peter responded that we need to get down deep inside of us this morning. It's that we don't need Jesus to necessarily tell us. We've already seen him move before. We've already seen him do miracles. Sometimes we just need to get close to him. God's word says in James 4:8, come close to God and God will come close to you. You don't have to have it all figured out to move toward God. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to see all the future laid out in front of you. You just need to move. See, maybe some of us, just like Peter, need to just jump in and start swimming. Just use what God gave you. You've got arms, you've got legs, just go. Just use what he's already given you. Is it time that you stop sitting in the boat, waiting to see what Jesus' next move will be? Maybe you just need to stand up, take off everything that might hold you back, and just go all in. Just go all in. And this morning, if you want to know why that's important, you need to know what Peter knew. He knew that Jesus was on the shore and that he needed to be restored. You see, after Peter swam to the shore, he had an encounter with Jesus that changed everything for him. And I want us to look at it together. We're going to go back to John 21, but we're going to skip down to verse 15. And the word says, after they had eaten, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these others do? Yes, Lord, he answered. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, take care of my lambs. And a second time, Jesus said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he answered. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, take care of my sheep. And a third time, I want you all to say a third time. A third time, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter became sad because Jesus had asked him the third time. And I want you to think about what Peter was probably thinking about when Jesus didn't just ask him one time. He didn't ask him 2 times. He asked him 3 times. And Peter said, Lord, you know everything. Peter's saying, there's nothing hidden from you, God. You know everything that I've done. And you know that I love you. And so Jesus said, take care of my sheep. See, for those who don't know, just before Jesus was crucified, Peter had stood up in the middle of the whole group of disciples and said, even if they all desert you, Jesus, I never will. And then later that same night, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times. So 3 times Jesus asked him, do you love me? And I think that was 3 failures recognized, 3 questions asked, and 3 opportunities for Peter to give a different response. See, what we need to know this morning is that the restoration that Jesus offers us is complete. It doesn't leave any loose ends. And I know this personally because 3 years into the life of our church, I was still here. And I was showing up every single week, serving, and we were giving. But I still thought deep inside of me that because of the story of my past, that I had reached the capacity of my ability to make any real difference here in this house. I believed, I listened, and I obeyed, but I still hadn't been restored. And because I'd held on to it for so long, if I'm being honest, it started to fester. And so it started to show up in my life as pride and hurt and anger and bitterness and jealousy and comparison. And one Sunday, I'm so thankful God spoke directly into that moment. Thumb, bruise, root of the issue. He spoke right to it, and I knew what God was asking me to do. He was saying, will you come close to me so I can restore you? And I knew what I had to do because I'd been in the house, so I'd been hearing his word. In James 5:16, it says, confess your sins to who? Each other. And pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person, listen, that doesn't mean a perfect person. That means a person who's trying to be in right relationship with the Lord. A righteous person. It has great power and it produces wonderful results. If I wanted to be fully restored, I had to move. So I gathered 3 people around me. And I want you to know this morning that it was 3 people who knew me, who I should have been honest with a long time before this day. Because I think there's many of you in the room this morning who you know you're 1, 2, 3 people. They think you're doing great. And I think today God is going to give you an opportunity to be healed. To be healed. I gathered those people around me and I told them that I had been carrying this hurt for so long that it was starting to make me sick inside. It's making me sick and I don't want to do it anymore. And listen, my friends did not judge me. They did not make fun of me. They didn't tell me, oh yeah, Britt, you really messed that up. No, they didn't do that. They laid their hands on me and they prayed for me. They prayed a powerful prayer. And in that moment, I felt the weight just drop off of me. What did I experience? Complete restoration. It was whole and it left no loose ends. You see, when I went all in, Jesus restored me. And my restoration, it positioned me to be able to respond differently than I had before just a few months later. See, just a few months later, Matt actually received a phone call, and we were offered a transfer to Nashville, Tennessee. Back toward home. Isn't God funny? He brought that thing full circle. It was the prayer that we'd prayed for 8 years and asked God to move us closer to family. It was right there. And it was the easiest no that we have ever had to give. But listen, had I not been healed, had I not been restored, I would have jumped at that opportunity. I would have pushed my husband to take that transfer. And I would have said, hey, Matt, this is our answer to prayer. This is it. God's just doing what we asked, when I knew deep down inside it was my way of not having to face what was going on inside of me. But because we had went all in, even before I experienced that restoration, then I was able to say, I can see what God has next. And I'm restored and I'm ready. You see, as a church, we exist to lead people to experience the God who can change their life. It's our mission statement. And we say it every single week, but you can come every week, you can serve on the team, you can be on our staff, and you can still miss it. You can still miss it. And so today I wanted to share my story with you because I have personally experienced him. And he's changed everything for me. Everything for me. I thought that because of my past, my decisions, my failures, my mess-ups, that I had been robbed of my future. But I'm standing before you today healed and restored. And even right now, God is equipping me for my future. And he wants to do the same thing for you right here and right now. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes?